All right, good evening, everybody. From New York, this is Matt Wade, Microsoft MVP and Chatbot and Office 365 sort of extraordinaire. Today's on this session for Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. I'm going to be covering basically the how-to of building your first chatbot within Azure. We're going to talk a lot about Q&A Maker, and then we'll talk a little bit about the logic and the language understanding that goes along with kicking off workflows. But really, this is going to be a lot of a step-by-step. Most of it's video recorded, so I don't run into any sort of demo issues, but lots of cool opportunity to learn how you can use chatbots as a knowledge management resource, a way to basically get people from what they want to do to actually kicking off and doing that thing without having to go looking for it. Having that single endpoint so that you don't have to go jumping around between applications, between different portals, things like that. So we'll run through how all this stuff works, and let's just hit up some of the basic slides I want to talk about here for the 365 Virtual Marathon. If you haven't been paying attention or you haven't been attending some of the other sessions yet, this is sponsored by the formerly known as the SharePoint Conference, which unfortunately used to be in May, but it was delayed out until next March due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but now known as the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, covering Teams, covering SharePoint, Power Platform, all the beautiful stuff that comes with Office 365, well, Microsoft 365. And major thanks to our presenter or our sponsors for this, because these kind of events would not be available or able to be performed without their sponsorship. Actually, I know a bunch of the people that work for a number of these organizations, and they're all really great folks. But let's dive right into the content today. So we're going to be talking about Azure Cognitive Services, Azure Bot Service, and a couple other features within the Azure side. The overview today is going to include access or steps that require you to have access to the Azure portal. Most likely have to be an administrator, but I will talk about some of the access points to some of these tools that can actually be done at the end user level, which is really powerful if you want to bring people from the lines of business into actually owning some of the bot aspects that aren't actually architectural and require a lot of access from the backside. But you're here because you're probably interested in how chatbots and AI and this whole, insert buzzword or buzz phrase here thing came about. Of course, we are sort of entering a new paradigm of human and computer interaction. I'm not saying this is a Westworld type of thing, but this is a very much people are expecting to be able to talk to their devices, to talk to their systems. Many of us are using Google Assistant or Siri or Amazon Alexa on the outside of work sort of realm, and they are now expecting that we have that sort of experience similarly when they get to work, so that they can make their experience a lot more useful and user-friendly, also more productive, because if you just have one endpoint to go to, that one chat box, whether it's in Microsoft Teams or if it's on a website or if it's in a mobile app, you can even do chatbots via SMS text messaging. You can call them using Microsoft Teams and sort of get like the same experience you'd have if you called like your bank right now. That type of stuff is what people are expecting. There is just no way around it. You should be looking at this, especially if you're looking at any sort of customer service, tech support, or even like field service type of things. So just from a perspective on the outside here, there are a number of use cases and examples out there that you can get a hold of. These are actually, the next few I'm going to talk about are specific ones that are built on Azure specifically. And you can look at the stories that go along with them, the customer success stories, the use case or the case studies, whatever you want to call them. I actually got to meet the team behind the Accenture DIPA bot because they were at Ignite back in 2019. Great team to chat with. They actually, this is their bot that they set up was specifically for dealing with HR requests in the Accenture India office. And they had almost 200,000 employees are using this bot now, reducing the number of potential requests by 20%, 2.6 million messages. Like that's a huge sort of experience going back and forth. A lot of success there, being able to answer common questions, kick off common processes so that the people that work in HR don't have to respond constantly to the same instant message, the same emails, the same phone calls, right? Let the bot do what it's supposed to do. A project that I personally worked on was with CCT Modal or Intermodal Transport, which is out of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and they actually built out a bot that basically reaches out to up to 12 different systems, depending on which workflows you're trying to kick off behind the scenes through the bot as a user. And this actually helped automate and digitize a lot of the transport aspects, just being able to have the correct paperwork for when you're making a delivery, shipping from the port over to, bringing it by rail or bringing it by truck, crossing country lines, things like that. Some amazing improvements there. And just for a very small team, they were able to basically eliminate 2.5 full-time equivalent, or basically 2.5 100% time people worth of effort, so that the people that were working on the tool or the requirements or the business processes that would otherwise be done by a human, they can actually do some other more productive work elsewhere. And then maybe something that would be more accessible to the everyday person would be this example here where Progressive. If you go to see Flow, their sort of mascot, you can actually talk to Flow through Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger is one of the channels that Azure Bot Service supports. So you're able to bounce in here and say hello, get some questions answered, and if there's a point where you're going to go forward and ask for a quote, this is a really great call to action. You can actually run these processes right from the bot experience as opposed to bouncing around. Probably if I'm going to go buy car or homeowners insurance, I'm not going to do it through Facebook Messenger, but at least it can bring me over to the portal within, the Progressive website that's specific to where I said, where I live, what kind of insurance I'm looking for, and those types of things. So really powerful stuff there. So that brings me to me. My name is Matt Wade. I am the VP of Client Engagement for AtBot, which is a no-code chatbot solution for the Microsoft Cloud. We build everything on top of Azure, but we make it so that you don't have to go custom coding in the background. That being said, I play in the chatbot and the sort of the AI field on a regular basis. Not a whole lot of surprise there, probably. If people know me for anything, though, I do have a lot of stuff that I do within the Office 365 field. And if anybody knows me for anything, it's probably the periodic table of Office 365, which is what you're looking at here. If you're interested in learning more about O365 or just all the stuff that comes with it, that would be a reasonable resource to check out. And I would recommend doing so if you're interested. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today is not about Office 365. Today is about AI. So let's talk about the actual architecture of what we are talking about when we mention AI, when we talk about chatbots, cognitive services, things like that. I think right now, to a lot of people, this is just a black box. It's just magic. It's not. And I'm not a developer. I'm actually not super technical. So being able to go off and build chatbots from my experience level, it just shows how reasonably easy it is to go forward and actually build these things. So pushing away the unicorns and rainbows here, when you do actually want to build a bot, there are 3 legs of the stool that you really want to make sure that you cover. First, you want to make sure that the bot is able to understand what's coming into it. Okay, so that's where that concept of natural language processing, NLP, buzz phrase of this decade, is coming in. And then you want the bot to be able to know whether it's supposed to kick off a workflow, connect to outside services, maybe send emails, send messages, update, financial reports, whatever. Maybe I want to request time off, and it can go through that process automatically in the background, or submit a receipt while I'm standing in line at the local Starbucks when I'm allowed back inside the local Starbucks. And then you want it to be able to also respond to knowledgeable questions. So answering FAQs and being able to provide people guidance without them having to go look for that guidance themselves, rely on SharePoint or Microsoft Search to maybe pop up a document that's 5 years old and not relevant any longer, but it's still popular because everybody clicks it. Having a vetted, correct answer through the bot means that you have a better value of curation. Somebody with subject matter expertise can make this stuff and make sure it's available. So when you do build this stuff, you're going to be working in Azure. The first thing you're going to be touching is the Azure Bot Service. That's where you're going to create the bot. If you do it certain ways. Actually, in this demo, we'll go through the easy way through Q&A Maker, but I will show that in a little bit. And you'll be building using the bot framework. For natural language processing, or the understanding, for the most part, you're going to be using a thing called LUIS. It's an Azure cognitive service called Language Understanding Intelligent Service, LUIS for short. And that's the natural language tool that you use to kick off workflows. So I can come in and say, I want to schedule a meeting tomorrow sometime with my boss in the main conference room to talk about the budget, right? And that's 4 pieces of information that I can say in natural language that LUIS is powerful enough to actually pull those entities out of it and then drop it into the workflow and say, hey, Matt requested this, can you please go forward and do that? And if I'm missing any information, the bot can come back and say, hey, you're missing 2 of the 5 form fields that you would otherwise have to fill out here. Please let me know. And then the knowledge side is going to be Q&A Maker. And that's what we're going to be spending most of the time today talking about. If you have experience with bot service and building out bots on Azure, this might be a little bit too simple. This is really meant for the people out there who are sort of interested in just dipping their toe into the AI field. And this is going to be a full build out. We're going to build a bot, live during this session. But if you already know Q&A Maker, you already know bot service, we're not going to get too much into the bot framework or Lewis today. It's really just going to be building out the Q&A Maker and then the possibilities you can go forward with when you use Lewis. Now, once you get into these services here and you start using Lewis especially, that's when you're going to be bringing in workflows and logic. So the logic for the most part is going to be done, custom coded, unless you get onto a platform like the one that I work on that makes it a little bit less coding. But that's not really new. That kind of workflow building and that logic building is not really new, which is why I'm not necessarily covering it today. The language modeling is actually the stuff that's really new and sort of novel for a lot of people. So I'm not going to cover that too much, but let's dive right in though to Q&A Maker and how this is going to work. So let's look at an example here of just somebody wanting to ask a question. Very common question from the IT perspective when you're internally at an organization. What's the Wi-Fi password? Great. You can have your bot come back and ask an answer, what's the Wi-Fi password? Here's a pre-written answer. If I had gone into SharePoint search, no guarantee that my phrasing of what's the Wi-Fi password would have gotten me an answer. Probably would have, close enough. And no guarantee that it would have come back with an answer. It probably would have provided me the web page that had information about logging onto the Wi-Fi, but it didn't actually answer the question. It just provided a source for the answer that I then have to go through and read and hope that the person that wrote it put the answer near the top and in big letters, because that's the important part of the question. But it's not just about that one way to say it, because a whole bunch of different ways can be stated. That's sort of the complexity of language, which is that vernacular, different phrasings, all of that kind of stuff can be stated by numbers of different people. So we want to bring these together, right? And perhaps we bring them together along with an answer. So we can put this in some sort of pretty tabular format. We can have all the different ways to ask the question in one side, and then we have a nice vetted, correct, subject matter expert approved response. Probably not even approved, just that SME probably wrote this answer because they're the ones that know exactly how that works. And when you get into Q&A Maker, the knowledge tool from Azure Cognitive Services, that's essentially what it looks like. So when you open up Q&A Maker, you're going to see this list of different ways to ask a question and then the answer. Now note, everything you see here is written by me or you, the author. It's not pre-populated. This is all knowledge and information that you want to have available and make available. So you have to provide the different seeded phrasings, which means that when you go through testing and whatnot, make sure that you try new people who haven't been involved in the project, because the way that they say things are potentially going to be different than the way that you do. And this is totally ignoring different languages. I'm just talking about within one language, people are going to say things differently, whether they're going to say something like, when are you going to do something versus when are you gonna do something, right? Those types of things generally need to be covered for. So that's sort of the intro here. What we're going to do today during this session is we're going to create a Q&A Maker knowledge base. That's what the tools are that you create in Q&A Maker are called. Based on that KB, we're going to create a bot in Azure. We're going to jump into a couple more advanced features in the KB, and then we'll talk a little bit about deployment options. So first up, we're going to create that knowledge base. You have to think about this. This requires some planning because there's a lot to it, even if you're going to start out with a reasonably simple bot. So just make sure you sit down, you think about what are the common questions that we get. If you have a ticketing system, make full use of that and identify through the metrics what are the most common things that we're being asked, and then consider this life cycle for this conversational bot. You want to do the design, build, do a little bit more design, a little more build, then you want to test it, okay? Run it through a couple people to have it tested first. When you're ready to publish it, put it out there. Make sure that people know the lanes that they have to stay in and what kind of questions the bot can answer and what kind of questions it cannot. And then kind of circle back. This is sort of a living document. It's very much like a website. Every time you publish an update, the next person to use the bot will have the new information. It's really important to keep in mind. So let's run through this as an example. Consider yourself, the proud new owner of Contoso Restaurants. I want to be able to put a customer service bot on our website so we don't have to answer phone calls, we don't have to answer emails, we don't have to go through Facebook Messenger, people asking us questions about standard stuff that we do. And over the course of this demo, we're going to go from one location and we're going to expand. We'll say that we noted some serious success within our business model, and we're going to expand to a few more cities. So we'll see how we can do that and use some of the built-in tools within Q&A Maker to make sure that regardless of the context that the users are going into, they're able to get answers to their questions. Now, we're going to put this into a website, very simple, but that is not the only place you can put this. You could put this into Microsoft Teams, you could put it through SMS text messaging using Twilio, a lot of services that are provided through Azure, which is really, really great. But in this one, we're going to talk about websites and the whole customer service, tech support, IT support, any sort of internal customer service, HR, finance, facilities, IT, those types of things are going to be really powerful for automating stuff. But in this case, we'll just call it a customer service experience, and we're going to run through a demo. Okay, so this demo is a video. Like I said, don't want to tempt the demo gods too much, but I also don't want to waste time by not being able to talk to what's going on. If you go to QAMaker.ai, that is the website where QA Maker happens to live. Once you have some background Azure stuff set up, which a number of resources I'll have posted afterwards, you have the ability to do this as the administrator. Then the users, in this case, I represent the user, actually, an end user who's able to manage this Q&A Maker knowledge base. So if I go to QAMaker.ai and I go up to create a knowledge base, I am able to basically start this process out. So I can choose where I want, which Azure tenant and which service and resource group and all that stuff that I want this to live in. And then I can name my knowledge base. So in this case, I'm going to call it Contosa Restaurants. And I'm going to skip this populate portion, but there is one section I am going to include, and it's called chit chat. This provides some small talk that makes things a little more human. Not exactly Turing test passing, but at least makes people feel more comfortable with the bot because it's able to answer something like, what's your favorite book? And it's all pre-written by Microsoft. You don't have to do it yourself. And imagine how much time that would take to come up with all the random things people would be able to ask. So once it creates, you'll see that there's actually a section in here called Q&A chat friendly.tsv. It has all these things pre-populated, and I want to start testing it to make sure that it's working. The only way to do that is to press save and train, and then I can open up this test pane on the right side, and I have a live chat box that I can start typing into. So first thing I'm going to say is, how are you today? And then you'll see I get a response, and then I'll ask something like, how old are you? And I'll get a response from that too. If you click the word inspect underneath your question, you will get an overview of how confident the bot was, or the knowledge base was on the question that you asked. In this case, it was 100% because apparently this phrasing was provided exactly verbatim in the question phrasings that were in the chit chat. But it's not just about the chit chat. Let's actually start adding something for our situation. So we're going to ask about doing private events, hosting private events, having luncheons, things like that. So you'll see I clicked on the add Q&A pair, and I go through and I provide a few different ways of phrasing that question that, same intent, but different ways of saying it. And then I'm just going to paste in a pre-written answer that's going to be good to go. Now I want to test this, so I'm going to save and train it again up on the top right. And once it's trained, which the model is reevaluated, I can go through, test it with a phrasing that I didn't actually include in that initial number of phrasings that I provided. So let's say, can I reserve the event space for a private party? Not something that I provided, but it's able to basically catch that and say, okay, yeah, you can reserve this space for upwards of 75 people. We can check the inspect, and you can see that the bot is 72% confident that it wants to point to that one. In this situation right here, I have the ability to connect it to a different answer. If that was the wrong one, I can point it elsewhere. I can actually add other stuff. The other things too to this is that I want to be able to pull in some other information. We already have an FAQ, say, on our website, which is what you're seeing here. So you can see there's a number of different questions and answers. Q&A Maker, slick enough, will let you actually import and scrape information from websites, including SharePoint sites, and Word documents and PDFs. So you can see I went into the settings area here and I clicked add URL with the URL that I copied from our FAQ. If I train it, it's going to scrape it. Keep in mind this is not live, so if I make updates to the web page later, it does not come in. I'd have to re-scrape or add it to 2 different places. But why do you need an FAQ page on a website if you have a bot to answer the question for you? So if I go back over to edit, I will have a few different sources. One is the first question that I added, the chit chat, and now all the information that was scraped from that web page. So you can see I can add some new phrasings here for the where you located, because there's a lot of different ways to say that. But on top of that, there's actually a question right under this, which is about the closest subway station, which is kind of like saying, where are you located? So why have both? In an FAQ situation, I might be looking for different things, but really this is just the same intent. So I'm going to copy over the answer to this question and then add that other question as a different phrasing for the first one, and then just delete the second Q&A pair. There's no reason to keep that. So I get a nice complete answer regardless of the way that you phrase this. You can see that I included a URL in this, uses Markdown, so it's really easy to keep that up to date. If I save and train this, I can then jump into the testing, and I can actually run through and say something like, how or can I get directions to your restaurant? And you can see from that pre-populated area, I never said, can I get directions to your restaurant? So if I add this in here now and I send this through, I should get the instructions that provide the those directions and even the link. So you can see it's 93% confident that I actually had done that. And if I click that link, I'm able to open this up within my favorite mapping software, and it'll show you. So that's the first step in this case. We'll close this stuff out and we'll jump back into this after we talk a little bit more about some more aspects of Q&A Maker. The last thing we're going to do here is to publish it. So just like a website, if you don't publish it, you don't see the updates on the outside. And then until you publish it, you actually have a draft version available to you at all times as the owner of the Q&A Maker knowledge base. At this point, we haven't done anything related to a bot. This is literally just a knowledge base. You can access this through other APIs. There's actually even a Power Automate, formerly Microsoft Flow, connector. So you can actually have connections go in and ask questions. Maybe you have an email that comes in and you want it to go ping Q&A Maker to see if there's an answer. And if there is, automatically respond to that email. Otherwise, don't, and then I can answer it myself. So there's a lot of opportunity here and a lot of cool things you can be doing. So we want to create the bot, and we're going to need some Azure access to do this. There are two different ways, at least in this case, to create the bot. I'm going to do the second way because it's actually much more easy. Doing this through the Azure portal, there are a number of different bot templates that you can use. They're all different types of web apps. You get to choose what you want, but if you create it through Q&A Maker, it's basically creating a Q&A Maker friendly bot, and it's just ready to go. Now, when you want to go forward and deploy this, it's important to know that there are a few different ways to do it. I sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what's important to know here is you have two different types of bots. You have an internal bot, which is an authenticated bot. The bot knows who you are, all from the Microsoft Graph, so it knows who your manager is, it knows what your phone number is, even knows the common, the people that you speak to most frequently and the files that you open most frequently. So these are a logged in experience. You're authenticated. This is where you're going to see it in Microsoft Teams, maybe SharePoint, maybe Dynamics 365, basically any web portal within the Microsoft Cloud that you're able to edit. You can also use a tool called Direct Line, which is a channel that's provided by Azure Bot Service to basically be a level up version of website experience. From the external side, or basically the non-authenticated side, you're basically an anonymous IP to the user. You have these external bots. These are things that you would put on a public website. That's what we're doing now. We're going to put this onto this website that we have going so far. But you can also put it into some social media feeds. You can also, or chat experiences, and then you can also connect through SMS text messaging, which is really powerful if you want to use it for sending notifications and not just say, reply 1 for yes, 2 for no, but if I get a notification, maybe I want to actually change something. Like if FedEx is delivering something and are you going to be there at 2:30 tomorrow, yes or no? Maybe I want to say no, and can I reschedule to the day after? And that would be a much better bot and user experience overall. So a lot of cool opportunity there. This is what the channel experience looks like when you do have a bot in Azure. So you have a number of different channels. The featured ones are Direct Line and Web Chat and Teams and Skype. But you have a number of other ones here, including Twilio. Twilio is what you use for the text messaging. So just keep that in mind. So let's jump right into the demo here, and we are going to go through, starting from where we left off. We just published the bot. What we're going to do here is from the publish page. What's really handy is you have that option to create bot based on that Q&A Maker knowledge base. So that's what I just clicked. And I'm going to give this bot a name. You do have to provide some information here, including payment information if you don't already have some resources ready to go for this. But if you have resource groups set up and you have your Azure subscription and you're good to go, boom, should be no problem whatsoever doing this as the admin. So all these steps should be accurate. Once you go through here, you'll notice that the deployment is in progress. You'll have a little notification up in the top right, and you'll see actually it'll give you a little notification once it's done, and you can actually jump into it. This can take a little while. So in this case, it took a little bit over a minute at the time, and you can then go to the resource when you're done. These days, it goes faster. So quick thing to talk about here is the configuration. You can actually see where the Q&A maker connection is. So there's actually 3 pieces of data from any KB to get connected to a bot. So you can actually show the host name, the auth key, and the knowledge base ID. And then you can also test the bot itself as a bot, not just as a KB, in the test in web chat. So in this case, we're going to ask that first question of, how are you doing? And we'll get an answer back, which will be coming from that chit chat that we had provided earlier. Now, a little more restaurant specific. Let's say I'm looking for the menu. This is now going to come back with respect to the scrape from the web page, because that's now in our knowledge base. Then we're going to open up channels. This is where you can manage where you're going to deploy the bot. In this case, I generally use the direct line channel to do so, because it's a little bit better than web chat. But in this case, we're actually just going to use web chat from a demo perspective, so you can see how it works. Web chat is basically just an iframe. It just drops the bot onto the web page, doing it that way. But you could also add Microsoft Teams here if you wanted this to be available in Teams. It's super, super simple to add these channels. Very, very easy to do. Now, there's a few other features that you can update here. You can add, for example, a bot icon, so it has a little bit of a brand. You can give it a better name. The display name does not have to match the bot handle. The handle is actually reserved. It's just like a Twitter handle, but the display name, just like on Twitter, can be different. So lots of other options here too. And then this is the direct line channel setup. And you can see just then that the new C popped up for the Contoso. So that was the new logo and the new icon that would be used for the bot overall. So if we jump back to Q&A Maker, we've now created that bot. That bot's available. Eventually, we'll want to deploy that to the web page, and we'll show you a little bit about that in just a little bit. Okay, so we have the skeleton of a knowledge base. We have the bot exists. It hasn't been deployed anywhere, but at least we can play with it. Now we want to actually build on what we know, and we want to build on what the bot knows. So that first example I gave was asking about the Wi-Fi password. The way that I said it, it was a little bit too simple. In real world, there's a lot of opportunity for multiple answers to one question, because the question that's being asked might be vague. So in a specific situation, the Wi-Fi password, actually, there might be multiple ones. There might be ones for an employee, for a contractor, for a guest. So really, I don't want to send this huge block of text that includes a bunch of if statements basically for that user. That's not a good user experience from a chatbot perspective. So you can actually go through and basically use this as a way to clarify. So this is called Multiturn. Basically, it brings you down different steps, and they can be contextual or not. But Microsoft calls it, or Q&A Maker, their team calls it Multiturn, and it involves follow-up prompts. So let's talk about how that works, and let's run through a couple examples of how we would actually use that. So we're jumping back to the knowledge base now. And what we're going to be doing here is we're expanding, right? I mentioned this restaurant went from one location, it's now going to be 4 different ones. So that very key question of where you located, well, now we have 4 different locations. You may have a web page for each one, but you might have a parent site or a parent brand web page where you want it to be regardless of the location. So the way to do that is we would rephrase our answer and say we actually have 4 locations, and click this button that says add follow-up prompt. So here we're going to add directions to the Denver location, and we can create a new response. You'll see that that is actually created as a Q&A pair, so somebody could ask that directly and still get the answer. And then we can add a bunch of other follow-ups for this too. Let's say we now have a Los Angeles location, we have a Miami location, a New York location, and all of these answers are going to be included and linked directly if you were to click the button that comes back as a response to that new Q&A pair. And again, these are separate Q&A pairs. They're all available. You can go through and ask, what's the directions to the Los Angeles location? What are the directions to the Miami location? And you will get the answer regardless of whether you go through that first initial where are you located question that required some follow-up prompt to it. So once we add this stuff, we have some good opportunity to clarify and bring people along the pathway that we think is important to us. And this last one we'll add here is specifically the New York location, which was the first one that we had originally. So if we save on this one, in addition to this, because it's its own Q&A pair, we should probably add some alternative phrasing so that it covers more of an option here. There's no right number for how many phrasings you should add. You should try to be as broad as possible and cover as many potential use cases or potential phrasings that are possible. Do not assume, do not try to have to, deal with misspellings or things like that. It generally covers that by itself, but you want to make sure that you're keeping different phrasing. So here, New York, Manhattan, NYC, NY, those types of things would not be naturally aligned together unless you force-fed it, which in this case you want to do. So we'll go through and we'll save and train. And once it's trained, we're going to pull out the test blade again. And what we're going to do is we are going to ask for directions. So you'll see we got our 4 buttons that pop up. You can style these any way you want on your website with some CSS and JavaScript, and you'll see that I chose New York, and then I can open up this link in a new tab, and I will get that same response as I got earlier. All right, and then we'll go back to Q&A Maker, and we'll talk a little bit more about some additional features after here. So let me just go forward. There we go. So that is the first initial potential use of Multiturn, but there's a lot you can do with it. So let's try to make the most of it. And this is where it comes down to sitting down and really thinking about it. For one, on a website, you have the opportunity to basically handhold users along a prescribed pathway that you've set up based on, people are generally going to ask questions A, B, C, and D. If they want to ask something else, say see more options, or they can just ask in natural language. Natural language is great, but the thing is that people are more likely to just ask frivolous things or ridiculous things that are not really within the swim lane that bot is really set up to do. So make sure that if you're on a website, you want to make use of that welcome message opportunity where you can actually send some buttons as like a precursor and say, hey, most people ask about the menu. You want to know about the menu? Things like that. If you're in Microsoft Teams, very different experience because persistent chat means that you can't actually do that. You only get the welcome message once in Teams. So you want to take advantage of like a help message or something like that. But being able to pull people along a prescribed pathway is something, especially based on metrics that you have that show people asking those common questions or kicking off common responses or processes, that's really important. So let's run through a quick demo of how we would do that. So if we are in Q&A Maker again here, we're just going to go back and edit the service. And what we're doing here is providing connections to other opportunities. So if I ask about the location for New York, maybe I should look up, a menu for New York, right? So what this is essentially is a pathway that is actually contextual to the conversation. Before, when I asked about location, it gave me those different Q&A pairs that were not specific to that conversation. This is different though. You can click that context only tab or a checkbox in the bottom left, and when you press save, you'll see the context only label. It means that you will only get to this. If I type in hours of operation, as you see in that top one, if I ever do that, I'm not going to get that Q&A pair because it's a context specific thing. I have to have clicked the button for hours of operation from the New York location help. So if I save and train that and I go into test it out and say, where's your Manhattan restaurant? I can say, see the menu. And I can get specific New York menu information because at this point the bot knows that I've been asking about New York. So that's a lot of good opportunity here. So I basically like to bring people along this pathway here, and I can go forward and publish this. So now it would be available, every time you publish, it's available. I can run forward with this and basically bring people along those pathways that are really important to me. So as you start thinking about this, the important aspects here are to lay out your topics. So I'm essentially bringing people through a bunch of loops, and it's not perfect because if I've already asked about directions, for example, and I go through an entire request process and I get the hours at the end and it says request directions, it's not going to be that smart, but at least it brings me through that loop. So you can think about this example, at least if I were to have, all the different locations, all the different menus and all the different hours that there are for each location, menus for each location, all that stuff. I'm basically asking after each one of those answers, hey, did you, if I ask about the location information, did you want to see the menu? Do you want our hours? It will bring you to those things and we'll keep looping back and forth. Really helpful to get people the information that they want or didn't even know that they wanted, but yeah, that can be really helpful. I'd love to see what's on special for today. If you do want to do this, think about putting it down on paper. It's actually really kind of difficult to think about this in a digital format. I guess you can play with some workflow or mind mapping tools, but I just use pen and paper to make this out. And you can see I kind of stayed with the same setup that they have. But let's actually build this out now in our demo. So in this demo, or in this portion here, what we're going to do is we're going to edit the service. And I'm actually going to show you a feature because I'm not going to build this out live, but I do have an existing knowledge base that I've built out and I can basically upload it. One thing you can do with Q&A Maker knowledge bases is I can import a tab separated value file and it will overwrite the entire document that's here. This is not the same thing as scraping a document or a web page. This is actually overwriting it with an existing TSV file. So once I import it and I press save and train, now I can start asking and answering these questions. So you can see there's a lot of different steps here, right? And I can go through and I can do some testing. Also, by the way, at the end of this session, you'll have a link to download this TSV file. So if you want to use this yourself to try it out, by all means, feel free, absolutely free to use. But you can see all the different steps and all the different permutations of pathways that you have now. So let's go in and ask a few questions. We can say something like, what are your operating hours, like we had before? And then I'm going to say, I want to know about Miami. Well, now I got an answer saying, would you like to join us here? Weekday hours, this is the list of hours. Would you like to get directions or see the menu? Get directions. All right, here are the link to the directions. Can open that up, and then I can go forward and see those directions. At the time for this, I was in Orlando for Ignite, and you can see that I can get directions from the location I was at, presuming Bing Maps doesn't freak out too much, to the Miami location. Now, if I go back, I can say here, I'd like to see the menu. I can choose which menu I want to see. I can see the lunch menu, and now it kind of brings me back to that need directions. So again, not perfect, but definitely helpful and can bring people along that way. One other thing you could be doing here is providing a call to action, maybe a button that says set up a reservation. And that's the kind of thing in the background that using the logic, you can actually connect to the reservation system. Maybe you're using OpenTable and you want to use their API. You can connect right to it to make sure that somebody can fill out that information and not have to leave the experience. Because once people leave the experience, they feel like they're not being catered to any longer, and that's kind of a bigger deal from the user experience side. Okay, when it comes to deployment, because we're now at the point, let's assume that the bot has all the information that we wanted to know. We're ready to put it out to our customers. You don't have to have it be perfect. A lot of times just being able to cover the most, 5, 10, 15 most common questions or processes is good enough for at least to start, because people will still see a positive experience there. When you do deploy, you have all those options. Like I said, websites, Teams, SMS, whatever. But when you do so, make sure that you cover a brand. Give that bot either your brand or a brand similar. When you see Progressive wasn't Progressive, it was Flow from Progressive, right? You want it to be able to have a personality and have its own sort of existence that's helpful, but also right to your culture. If you're a hip new restaurant in Brooklyn, you want to be funny, you want to make comments, you want to be witty, things like that. So make sure you have a name, make sure that you have a good welcome message that prompts people to do what you think is commonly needed by them. Make sure if they say help or something like I'm confused or how do I do this, you will get some prompting there to help the users along and bring them where they need to go. And then the last thing is the default message. The default message is what Azure calls that message that comes back when the bot didn't understand what came into it. Make sure that that's helpful. Make sure that it brings people back to the experience, because there's not a whole lot more frustrating than going to a bot and getting the I don't understand response. But most importantly here, especially from a branding perspective, personality. Give that bot, throw some Easter eggs in there, throw some jokes in there, make it so that people can have a good time with it. So in this case, we wanted to deploy this to the website. Now, a lot of organizations, you'll see the websites will have a chatbot pop up from like the bottom right corner. Very common design practice in the late 2010s and early 2020s. And I don't think that that's going to last very long. I think that eventually we're going to get to a point where really people are just asking or trying to get what they want, the information or kick off the process. And I think that the bots are actually going to be much more front and center, like directly on the pages themselves. This is not a beautiful example because I'm just pasting in the web chat experience, the iframe right into the web page. But why not just get people right to the chatbot and say, hey, I'm here to help you. Here are the 4 questions that people normally ask me. How can I help you? So a lot of good opportunity here, and just drop it right on there and don't feel so bad about it. The same can go for things like, internal SharePoint sites. So maybe for being able to kick off and answer common IT requests and still manage tickets in the background. So, if somebody puts in a request, says I need to do X, the bot is able to recover and deal with it. No human ever sees it from the IT help desk side, but the ticket is still logged. It's still, the metrics are still there, and IT still gets the credit for the support and for managing something like this. And then dropping this into Microsoft Teams, which means that you have it both on desktop and on mobile. So in this example, you have here a vacation time request, right? Being able to you can even speak to your phone and say, I want to go do blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you roll over in bed and you feel really crappy the next morning and you just, tell Siri to tell Teams bot that I'm not feeling well today, I'm calling in sick. And you don't even have to really turn over in bed to put in a sick day request. Now, that was just the knowledge aspect. There's a lot more to this. I mentioned earlier the fact that you have the Lewis side of things and you have the workflow and the logic side of things. I'm not going to dive into very much detail here because there's not much time left, but I do want to point out here is as you build these workflows or the logical workflows in the background for what somebody requests, there's going to be one Lewis intent to one workflow. And if we were to compare here a little bit difference between Q&A Maker and Lewis, an information-based type of experience would be like on the left here, where somebody says, what's your carry-on baggage policy on a, maybe to a chatbot on an app for an airline. And then Q&A Maker has a response and says, okay, are you flying domestic or international? And that's just a Q&A Maker experience. But if I want something more complex, and I want to say, when does flight 234 from Chicago to London depart? Lewis is able to actually grab the information, flight 234, source, Chicago, destination, London, and then figure that out and actually go into the database, look it up, find out what the status is, come back and say, this is it. Now, the coming back and the looking up in the database, that's all about the logic. So that's really sort of important to keep in mind here. Now, the Lewis aspect is going to be really critical because you can do a lot of really powerful things. Q&A Maker is just a starting point. And while, yes, in 45 minutes, I was able to cover all that stuff about Q&A Maker, you can go off and do a lot more stuff. But Lewis is really where it's at, and this is going to be, the next big step for you after you build that knowledgeable bot. Build that actionable bot. Go off and connect to a number of different services and make updates. And maybe you're working in for an organization like I don't know, the Best Buy Geeks, right? Geek Squad, and somebody's just a field service tech is just arriving to a customer's house. You can go into the bot and say, just arrived at task 2 for the day, and now that bot can update that, and that person didn't have to really do anything. They could have even set it in the car, hands-free, by just talking to the bot over Microsoft Teams. Really, really powerful there. Now, I hope that gives you some ideas. I realize it's kind of a fast concept or a fast time to go over sort of a bigger concept, but there's a lot of playing around and toying you can do here and building some really cool tools. You can kind of jump around with the idea of, do I build one all-encompassing concierge bot, or do I only build multiple, I have one for IT, one for finance, one for field service, put them out internally. Do I have one for customer service on the outside and tech support, or do I have one that just does both and it points them out in different directions? There's a lot of opportunity. There's no right way to do everything. There are plenty of wrong ways. But just, it's not that hard to go off and start doing this, and really, it's not that expensive to do this either, considering, what it costs for somebody who has a brain in their head and is knowledgeable about how to do things. Those people cost salaries, and if they can be off doing not, minutia type of answering the same questions and processes and clarifications over and over again, and it can be doing something productive and really like building the business, that's what these bots are really for. So this is that new paradigm. Sort of look at it as something you embrace. And if you haven't really gotten into this yet and want to ensure some job security, this is really the kind of stuff that you want to kind of dive into, because it's going to be an opportunity for moving forward in the future. Now, a couple things I want to make sure that we cover here. There is a raffle for an Oculus here, so make sure to fill out the raffle at that link below. You'll see it elsewhere referenced in the conference today. Also, there is a great opportunity here for donating for a number of different COVID-19 related resources. So make sure to check these out as well. Obviously, we're all in a new world compared to the last couple months, and there are a lot of people that could need some help out there. So if you can consider donating there, that would be awesome. Now, the thing that most people always look for is resources. So I want to make sure we cover that. First off is the table of Azure Cognitive Services. This is sort of a sister product to the periodic table of Office 365. AI.jumpto365.com. Feel free to check that out and see if it's something that can help you out. And then getting into Q&A Maker, both from my perspective on the left and the Microsoft official resources. Definitely check these out. I'm going to skip them quick though, because what you really want probably are going to be the slides. They will be provided after this, but if you want to, you can get my slides right now. Just go to that jump.to/Matt Presents. Caps matter, so capitalize M and P. You'll be able to get the Q&A Maker KB from this slide set because you can get that link elsewhere. And then if you're interested, if you happen to dive into the Office 365 or the Microsoft 365 stuff, I will be doing another session later today. That'll be 9 p.m. EDT. I forgot to put EDT on there because obviously the world revolves around the Eastern time zone in the US. But at the other times that you see there, so if you're looking for a good intro, especially for everyday users, an intro to Microsoft 365, formerly Office 365 groups in Outlook, Teams, and Yammer. And with that, I think I am up on time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the live event real quick, and I'm going to see if there are any questions that popped up, and I can sort of jump into them. It's not perfect because this does have a slight delay. Okay, so a question here that popped up is how much can you customize the visual aspects or design of the chatbot when embedded on a website? The beautiful part, and another reason that I didn't really talk deployment all that much, is that a bot on a website is literally just another web part, just a part of that website. So you're really just doing CSS and JavaScript. Absolutely zero connection to the bot itself. So you can format the and style, the fonts, the colors, when the buttons pop up, they can be not the same width, things like that. So there's a bunch of opportunity there, and I didn't cover it because you're not talking about chatbots at that point. You're talking about web development and customizing how a website looks and feels. All right. So it looks like that is the only question that I had pop up on the list here. With that, let me just pop back up the URL so that you can all see the web page again, where you can get these slides. And I will leave them up for the time being and sign off in a couple minutes. But until then, thank you all very much for coming out today. And please stick around for the rest of the session. There are a bunch of really good sessions coming up over the course of the next day or so. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Matt Wade. Feel free to reach out to me. Actually, I can give you contact information as well. Let me do that quick, and then I'll jump back to the resources. Oh, actually, you can get the resources are listed here at the Matt Presents. And if you have any interest in providing feedback, which please do, we always appreciate knowing whether we're doing good, bad, or indifferent, how this can be better. This is the first time ever for this type of event to occur. This was a replacement sort of for the SharePoint conference back in, this month. So feel free to hit that QR code and provide feedback. I would welcome anything you have to say. And you can grab the handout here. And again, this will provide you the link to get to the TSV file that you can download and actually play around and see for yourself. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the time that you have here.